Okay, welcome back to the channel, guys. It was a slow week for me, but I got busy with stuff in the grown-up world, blah blah blah. But here I am, and I'm back to talk about Double Impact. And hoo boy, this one was a slog, I'm not gonna lie. I mean, I don't think it was just the fact that I was trying to sort of watch it in little chunks while I worked on other things. This movie, honestly, it's not the worst thing I've ever seen, but I don't really have a whole heck of a lot to say about it, despite my notes. And I took notes, but there is really nothing to this movie beyond its gimmick. But I don't think I can keep it up with my head screwed on right, and I don't often do this, and I promise I'm not doing this to be cute, but being as this is a hard movie for me to even talk about at length, like again, it was just like dead on the screen for me most of the time. I think maybe just a little judicial swig of liquid self-righteousness is maybe what I need. So here we go. I think that ought to help a little, but anyways, in all seriousness, I can actually say a couple of nice things about this movie before I start complaining. First of all, the movie is very well shot. In fact, I was particularly impressed with the opening. You know, for the first 10 minutes or so, in fact, I was kind of getting low-key hopeful for this movie. And I was also kind of impressed that we weren't seeing Van Damme within those first 10 minutes. Granted, it's because we're seeing the twins when they're still infants as the movie opens, but I still appreciated that he seemed to have enough restraint to not throw himself into the movie full frontal center frame right off the bat. Especially given that he's credited as a co-writer on this movie, that was one of those little moments where I thought, okay, Van Damme, maybe I underestimated and unfairly overlooked the early part of your career. Maybe you knew what you were doing back then and people were just hating. There's some very impressive stunt driving in an early scene where the twins are separated from their family. And with the way that the movie is lensed feeling very European, but this obviously being Asia, it creates this aesthetic cultural mashup that is a little bit eccentric and feels a little weird at first, but is also just kind of cool. Like, I was enjoying it, I was with it. I felt like the movie had given me some confidence, and I relaxed and I settled in for a fun B-movie romp. Then we get our first scene with the twin Chad, and man, oh man, where do I start? At this point, I was still sort of with the movie, but I had switched gears and decided that, okay, this is the Van Damme I know and sometimes love for his narcissism, so maybe this is just going to be a so bad it's good kind of a scenario. For those of you who haven't seen Double Impact, this first scene with Chad / Van Damme starts out with one of the most protracted and gratuitously slow pan-out shots looking at a woman in an exercise bikini arching her back on a yoga mat. And it goes on for, like, I swear to God, what feels like a good minute and a half. And look, as a hetero male, am I gonna sit here and tell you I was completely disgusted the whole time? No. But eye candy will only get you so far. And then it just starts feeling creepy. Like, I almost started to feel a little bit unclean the way this camera was lingering on this girl, especially with Van Damme's voice being spoken off screen, telling her, like, you know, that's it, keep going, baby, you got it, And then I'm not even sure if the camera does break or not. There might be a cut in there, but it feels like it keeps panning out all the way until we get a nice shot of Van Damme's ass in his purple spandex. Just in case you missed the point, Van Damme is only too happy to flex and squat and do the splits with his ass to the camera, and it is honestly like right center frame. Like, throughout this scene, I was working so hard to stifle my laughter and not wake up my girlfriend that the cats were staring at me. I also don't get why all the ladies are oohing and awing throughout that scene, because his ass is to the camera and these ladies are all around him in a semicircle, so what the hell are they gushing at? Fine, Van Damme, I get it. I gotta do more squats at the gym, okay? Message received. At one point in my notes, I actually wrote down the question, is this guy 16? Because Chad, honestly, in terms of his behavior, his dialogue, his whole manner and just way of being, he literally acts like a goddamn kid. I actually found myself wondering whether or not this movie was actually the secret inspiration for Jack with Robin Williams. At one point in the movie, he shows up wearing a turquoise shirt and these pink shorts hiked up past his navel, and it looks like something Carlton Banks would wear. Which is great if you're Carlton Banks. The way that Alex is introduced is kind of unintentionally hilarious, or maybe it was intentional, I'm not sure. That's another thing about this movie, is that the tone kind of feels off in places and a little bit confused, but we will get to that. But when Alex, Chad's twin, shows up, it's right in the middle of Chad getting friendly with a lady, and he just kind of turns to one side, and you get a close-up of Alex with a grimace, and he socks him right in the face and it blacks out. Then, after a lot of grumbling and bitching, Alex just kind of goes along with Chad on his adventure for no particular reason. Besides the fact that if he didn't, there would be no movie. I'm not going to rank out the technology that they used to create the twins, even though it does make it unintentionally funny more often than not. Simply because in general, 91, special effects, were still pretty primitive. It really has only been within the last several decades, like the last 10 or 15 years, that we've started to get movies where the special effects and the CGI and all that kind of work is starting to feel very seamless and solid. Either way, the sight of two Van Dammes imposed on the same background does make for some derisive laughter. But even that aspect of the movie is honestly not as much fun as it should be. And I think a large part of that is because of Van Damme's performance here. His approach to creating two different characters between Chad and Alex respectively seems to have been that he put all his work into acting Chad out as a character and put none into Alex, and just hoped that that contrast would be enough to sell them as two different personalities, when really it's just one overplayed personality and one non-performance. With a script that was self-aware or witty or just more willing to have fun, even that might have worked. You might have been able to work that into something effective. But unfortunately, Double Impact seems to take itself relatively seriously and wants us to perceive Chad and Alex as action heroes and heroic figures rather than comic foils. There's a lot of fun things you could have done with this, but again, the movie does not really do anything with it beyond the initial gimmick. It's very hard for us to get seriously invested in these twins as heroes when the story is so non-existent. The movie doesn't even really seem to take the story all that seriously. We just kind of meander from one abandoned harbor to one abandoned water plant to another abandoned harbor to a pier to a back alley. Any cheap outdoor locale they could find to stage a fight scene, they took it. A bunch of events with these two twins that are finally over. At one point, I actually caught myself writing in my notes the question, is there even a story here at all? For that matter, I know I already touched on sort of the personality imbalance that exists between Chad and Alex, but truthfully, most of the story, to the degree that that exists in this movie, seems to belong more to Chad. I mean, Alex almost always feels like an afterthought. He doesn't say much. We don't learn a whole heck of a lot about him. He just shows up to grimace and looks serious beside Chad the Goof. In fact, you could pretty much remove the Alex character from the movie altogether, and it would barely function any differently. I honestly wouldn't be shocked if Van Damme just bought the rights to this or something and insisted on rewriting it to put the twin plot in there. But let's face it, the title Single Chad doesn't really draw the same kind of box office, does it? Even Jeffrey Lewis as Uncle Frank fails to make an impression, and Jeffrey Lewis was a long-time character actor who was in a lot of movies over the years and was very dependable, but the poor guy has nothing to do here but stand around and looked like he just watched his parents having sex. The same blank, dumbfounded look on his face the whole movie. The one area where you might still expect this movie to deliver the goods or at least be competent would be the fight scenes. Right? Wrong. These fight scenes have about as much dynamic personality as Alex. There's just something off about them. They're dull. I don't know how to describe it, but every beat, every punch and kick and throw and hold and gunshot all seems like just one or two beats too late. Like the whole thing is really dragging. I give them props for not editing it too fast to make it look more frenzied. You still could have picked up the pace a little bit though. I mean, the shots are held so long that there's no sense of momentum or rhythm whenever anyone's attacking someone. It just falls flat. Again, it always feels like it's 2 steps too late when it finally happens. That's the only way that I can think to describe what it was like for me watching the fight choreography in this movie. Even in practical terms, most of these fights don't really consist of much more than guys taking turns hitting each other until one of them falls down. The closest we ever come to seeing any real personality out of Alex is when he becomes paranoid that his girlfriend might be cheating on him with Chad, and that element of jealousy is only in the movie to give us an excuse for Alex to have a paranoid fantasy play out on screen where he's imagining his girlfriend having sex with Chad. 90 minutes of this nonsense might have been tolerable, but at almost 2 hours, it starts to feel like a bit of a ludicrous indulgence. There is not nearly enough of a story to cover that kind of runtime, and the pacing is butt. I hate to think this cynically, but I really do feel like this movie was sold on the gimmick and nothing else. Like, I don't think that Van Damme really had any serious investment or inspiration or enthusiasm when it came to the script. I honestly think he thought that the gimmick of twin Van Dammes was enough to put butts in the seats. And from what I can remember, I think this movie was a modest commercial success domestically, so maybe he wasn't wrong, but at the same time, without going back and looking at the box office figures, I have a funny feeling this was one of those movies that might have had a big opening and then a real fast drop-off. Well, this is done, and frankly, so am I. If you have not seen Double Impact before, I can't recommend it even as a so bad it's good watch. Again, not the worst movie ever made, but just a very dismal, lifeless slog. I mean, the fact that I don't even get that many good laughs out of a twin Van Damme movie should tell you something. But I know for a fact there are some greener pastures within the Van Damme catalog, so I'll just chalk this up to a learning experience. I can check it off my list, and I never need to watch or think about this stupid mess again. Thanks so much for watching, guys, if you did. Keep your eyes tuned to the channel for more new content coming soon, and I will catch you later.